listening live to the Too Extreme Horror Show, where tonight we're going to be covering one of Dalton's favorite movies of all time, it seems like, The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp, and a personal favorite of mine and one of my favorites of his, actually. So this ought to be pretty interesting. It was a film that we talked about a year ago, maybe doing one day, and the time is now for it. Jay, good evening, sir. I see that you're in here. And Dalton, of course, you're the special guest tonight. How are you?
I am good. It's always a good day when I can talk about this movie.
Yeah, The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp. I'll start off by just giving you my overall viewing experience with it, and then we'll go from there. For me, when this movie came out, I think it was early '99 that I saw it in a theater. I just remember being intrigued by the poster, and I never hated Johnny Depp, but I was always mad because back in high school with E, we would talk about movies and stuff, and there was a new channel on television called Fox. And he was telling me about all the shows that were coming out, and he goes, "What would you put on the show?" I said, "Well, we're in high school. Why don't they have something in high school that's undercover like T.J. Hooker?" And sure enough, he's like, "Well, they have something called 21 Jump Street." And I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And then that's where I first knew Johnny Depp. So I always joke about having a grudge against him because Fox stole my idea for 21 Jump Street, because really it's not as good as T.J. Hooker, and that was my thing. That being said, I went and watched this movie. Not a lot of people were in the theater. It kind of came and went. It was one of those movies that I thought, hey, I kind of liked it. It's pretty good. It's a slow burn. But I just found myself thinking about it every now and then. And then somehow, I don't know, somebody gave me a copy or said, oh, you want it or something. And I had it on like VHS or DVD or something. And I would just watch it over and over again. And so part of what we talked about with the top 10 movies of 2019 last night on our stream was that entertainment is obviously a very, very big thing for ranking movies. And there's just a lot of things about this movie that entertain me. And I think tonight we're just, instead of doing a deep dive scene by scene, we're just going to talk about some of the themes that we like, what's really cool, pick out some examples. Because by and large, this is, to me, I don't even know if it's a horror movie. It's funny to me. It doesn't have a happy ending. It has probably some major plot holes that you could argue, which kind of are confusing. But I don't know. I just like it. It's a guilty pleasure of mine, and I just think it's awesome. So, what about you, Don?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it a horror movie necessarily either. I think just a thriller
Thriller?
is
Yeah.
more the word. It very much is kind of reminiscent of like early sort of turn of the century pulp novels. Like Corso himself is very much kind of the classic sort of almost noir gumshoe kind of character, but in a more sort of high society setting because of course he's a rare book authenticator and so forth and
He's a what?
being as I've collected antiques pretty much since I was 6 years old, there's something extremely relatable even just about that, which I found funny.
Yeah, and to me, I think that's a good point about being a gumshoe, because I thought about that too. Because there's a scene in here where someone says to him, "Oh, like a book detective." He's like, "Sort of," and I thought that was kind of funny. But to me, you're absolutely right the way you describe it. And Eglantine described this to me because he's not the biggest fan of it. And he just rolls eyes. He goes, "Why do you like it?" And I go, "Man, it's pretty good." And I like to bag on Hitchcock a little bit, and he's a huge Hitchcock fan. He goes, "The Night Gate is Hitchcock's best film that he never directed," something along those lines. And that always stuck with me because it's true. It does seem a lot like Hitchcock. And of course, you could say that probably about any movie these days. But obviously, this is not Hitchcock. It's Polanski, I believe. And leaving out his background and stuff like that, I don't know how he came across it. But I was actually also familiar with the book from the Spanish writer. Too, the Club Dumas, which this is actually only like a side plot to it. So this just borrows loosely from it. So you don't really need to know the book at all, too. But the one thing I really liked about this film was the fact that Johnny Depp starts off as a sleazebag, and he doesn't, find himself or any of this other kind of crap. He's a sleazebag, and he's a punk. But the thing is all the other people around him start off a certain way, and they end up being ultimately, I think, worse than he is. I mean, it's a bunch of bad people you don't really like or care about, but for some reason, because he's trying to investigate something, you get drawn into the chase of it. And it just so happens in here, he's trying to authenticate a book by somebody that supposedly has the secrets to hell in it. And it's kind of neat how they show this to you in what I think is a very somewhat intelligent fun way about doing it. So why don't you just talk about the plot and let everybody know what you think about it?
Okay, so our protagonist for this particular evening is a rare book authenticator and dealer by the name of Dean Corso, and he gets tasked by a sort of high society, very opulently wealthy, sort of literature publishing magnate by the name of Boris Bolkin to authenticate his copy of a book by the name of The Nine Gates of the Kingdom of Shadows. And obviously there's a lot of books that this book is based on, but it's not actually a real book. And yes, I have looked. Um, because of course, why wouldn't I look? Um, and essentially this book contains the secrets of how to summon the devil and to make a deal with said devil for power and the ability to determine one's own destiny and essentially become a demigod or a god. And as a result, a bunch of rich, opulent wackos want said book to do, well, that, and he gets caught in the middle because the thing is, Corso is the quintessential likable asshole.
Yes.
Yes, he's shrewd and yes, he's cunning, but he's respectable in that he does have his own personal code of honor and he does live up to that code of honor as much as possible. There are many times throughout the movie that he's, bribed, bullied, beaten, and so on and so forth, and he doesn't break his own personal rules. As Bulkin puts it, and he's kind of the big bad of this particular movie, there's nothing more reliable than a man whose loyalties can be bought for hard cash.
Yes.
And that sort of Bulkin's or Corso's thing is, you're paying me, you're paying well. I respect you as a client. I respect my own business acumen. Therefore, if I say I'm going to accomplish X, then X is going to get done. Unfortunately, he wasn't banking on being bribed, bullied, and almost murdered like three times throughout the plot. Thus, the intrigue that comes along. And of course, he brings along essentially what amounts to, and we don't find this out until later, but a familiar demon who is tasked with sort of overseeing this demonic puzzle that the devil has set up so that he can determine who gets access to this information about this process of making a deal and becoming a living god, essentially.
Yeah, so for me, after several rewatches, I mean, obviously the way Polanski does his films, you can go back and catch some things, which I always appreciate that. So it's not just a one and done sort of thing. And so basically, there's a scene that opens up at the beginning where some guy hangs himself and you don't know why, but the book that he has ends up being bought by this guy Boris Balkan, who's portrayed by the guy that did Dracula, Frank Langella. And I have to sit there and say, this movie with Johnny Depp, we talk about the other characters being sleazebags. This movie is, some of the acting on here is phenomenal, and some of it almost borders on a ludicrous to me. I'm thinking of Lena Olin in here. But I just got to say, Franklin Jelen here is just fantastic. This guy's just got this primal energy about him. He's a big dude. I remember him in Dracula, and I think 78, 79. Just magnificent presence. He's an older guy, and so they kind of meet because the whole hook here at the beginning is that I've got this book. I want you to authenticate it. And just the way he talks is so hypnotic. It is so. It just draws you and
Well,
sucks you in.
well, that's the thing about this, and it's kind of a wonderful thing about it. All of the people in this movie are varying degrees of morally questionable and untrustworthy, as it were. But as per kind of the old world upper class sensibility, everyone speaks with they have a very civil sort of honor among thieves thing going, whereby we'll stab you in the back, but we will be, as polite and as formal as possible while we're in the process of stabbing you in the back. And if you give me what I want and you are a good man of business, as it were, as Dickens would have probably put it, then you will get your due, and we need not have any issues. If you don't give me what I want, then then the obligatory Martin Scorsese-esque "you can sleep with the fishes" lines start flying, and away we go.
Yeah, and there's fishes in this film, if you haven't seen it. So the whole hook here is that he basically gets hard to authenticate this book, and he gives it to Johnny Depp, which is Corso. And what I think is kind of neat is I started noticing little things that are like cheesy. Like there's the scene where he falls asleep while the Corso's or while Frank Langella's giving Balkan's giving a lecture. Of course, we see the familiar for the first time, and they're watching him, and it's not necessarily readily obvious, but and then when I'm back watching it, going, God, it's so obvious. But they go up to his penthouse, and he shows them stuff, and I felt like there were several scenes in this movie that were bullet pointed or ad libbed slightly because just the timing of it. And here it just slows down enough where he's like, do you believe in the devil, Mr. Corso? And, all this other stuff. And when they're going up the elevator, his code is 666. And to open up the lock to his book area was 666 also. And it's like, if you're just paying attention and watching the first time or two you see this film, while they're talking, you might miss little things like it. And so it's kind of cute. But he sends him on his way. So great. He's flying over to Europe. We're on an adventure. This is kind of cool, and it's not really overbearing, I don't think so much. But the one thing I did want to ask you about before we kind of continue into the first verification is that, and I don't mean this is any particular slight to anybody watching or whatever, and I don't know the answer. That's why I'm asking. I'm just going to simply make the observation. For some reason, at least in this film, Polanski wanted to have a lot of goofiness, it seemed like, with disabled characters. And I point out the fact that the beginning scene is as he's swindling this disabled guy who can't speak or talk, and he rips them off of a Don Quixote. And then
Well,
after
well,
that, I
okay.
mean, the guy that's pointing at him in there is supposed to look like Hitchcock. I mean, so I don't know why he's doing it, but he does it the entire film.
Well, to be fair, the people that he's swindling in the opening sort of cold open there is the children of the people who uh are the children of this guy who's essentially paralyzed entirely,
Hmm.
and they're stabbing their father in the back to sell off his book collection and get rich. And we only really see this when it gets to the sort of crown jewel of his collection, which is a four volume collection of Ibarra's Don Quixote, um, from 1780, as we find out later. And he offers to pay them 4,000. And of course, these children are very obviously trust fund babies who have never had to work a day in their lives and don't know anything about anything. And so he offers to pay them like 4,000 or 4,200, and they think it's fine. But as it turns out, the majority of the worth of this collection goes with Corso when he takes the Don Quixote. And of course the other book authenticator who is also called in for this famously calls him unscrupulous in a very comedically over the top way, which I always laugh hysterically at because it goes to prove just how shrewd and how good at his business Corso is in comparison to even other uh, book authenticators. But when he's challenged on the fact that he's a vulture, as Witkin puts it, he responds with, "Who isn't in our business?" And of course, we find out from his friend Bernie there, who is like the main book dealer he deals with, that does appear to be the case. Again, the old high society will always stab you in the back kind of thing. I never take it as an insult that disabled characters end up getting screwed in this, because it's not as though they're treated as incompetent or anything. It's
Right.
just everyone is screwed over in this movie. Everyone at some point is screwed over, and the only thing that prevents you from being screwed over is being incompetent, which honestly I'm entirely in favor of. Like, competence is something that I have an immeasurable amount of respect for. Morality be damned, literally. So, yeah, I'm totally fine with the fact that basically everyone gets screwed over with this movie. And I like the fact that despite the opportunism of that guy's children, they end up getting fleeced by someone who's better at it even than they are. So it's kind of a condemnation of naked selfishness, if anything, I think.
Oh, I agree. And anytime anybody tries to be slick in here, they pay a price. And when I was thinking about how to title this or just put some words down about the Ninth Gate, because well, a lot of people I'm sure have seen it, I just think of Johnny Depp, and everyone thinks of him as being the guy in this or the guy in that, and I never hated him. But I never really liked the Disney movies that he's been in, and he's making $1 gazillion, and he's a weirdo dude. Okay, that's cool. But for some reason, I go, this is the Johnny Depp that I appreciate and I like because I think he does the sleazebag thing the entire film, but specifically, where he rips people off at the beginning, so great. I'm like, I almost want to root for him, because to your point, he's got some principles and you know what they are early on, and you see a demonstration of how good he is at that. And of course, he gets technical, some book speak or whatever about it. And he's even a professional when, Liana, who's played by Lena Olin, who's the wife of the guy that killed himself. She's wanting to get the book back, which we find out later she's a part of a secret sect and all the stuff with it. But she is so over the top seducing him and all that, and she seduces him and he screws her, and we're all as guys watching a scene going, okay, he's gonna tap that. And then as soon as they're done, they're just laying down there all sweaty, and she's like, "Where's the book?" And he's like, "I don't have it." She's like, "Don't fuck with me." And he's like, "I
Yeah,
just
she
did."
goes full bitch mode.
Yeah, no, it's just funny, and of course they go to Spain. They see the brothers there, to get some information about it, and it's just something that he wants to goof with having this little way you film a double that's the same thing, kind of like we've talked about before on Double Impact with JCVD on our shows. But this is where you start learning that the book he's got has these engravings, and we've seen it a little bit, but they have LCF in the corner rather than AT for Aristod Torquia, who's supposed to be the guy that got it and everything else. So you're like, oh, it's a 3 by 3 type of puzzle. So if you can just look at the other ones, and it makes sense enough for you to watch it. You may not know who's going through his bags, who's doing killing, or anything else like that at all. And those are some plot holes we could always argue about, but I'm choosing to ignore those for right now because it doesn't really matter for the movie. Um, but for some reason, I found myself liking when he goes to check the Fargus collection or whatever. The guy that has this big old style mansion in Portugal, I believe it is, and he's there just selling books occasionally just to keep his lifestyle up, and he's just playing the violin to himself or whatever. There's just something elegant about the way these shots are filmed and the pacing of it that I'm just drawn into this hook, line, and sinker. I mean, and you think you're halfway through the film, and time wise you might be, but it just feels like you're only just getting started.
Yeah, it's a very like restrained, refined look at like the posh lifestyle. Like it's definitely high society, and this movie eats, sleeps, and breathes high society atmosphere, but it's not garish or flamboyant. Everything in this movie has that air of like intellectual respectability about it, and that's part of I think what makes it work so well with the noir atmosphere, and even the little comedic touches add to it. Like in the scene where Liana is seducing Corso, they actually literally reference like old noir style movies, like they reference, I think it's the Maltese Falcon, like
Hmm.
the woman with the automatic in her stocking and so forth, and I'm like, okay, that definitely proves that Roman Polanski intended this to kind of be a send up to the sort of supernatural noirs of the golden age of Hollywood, and I am totally here for it because that's another area that I'm kind of expert in is sort of the pulp era of stories and comics. So mixing that with the overt supernatural element of this whole thing is like this movie was basically designed for me from the basement to the rafters because I collect antiques, I'm an occultist, and I love noir stuff and pulp comics. So this movie was basically designed for me entirely, and I am totally here for it.
And one thing I have not mentioned though, you don't have to have all these elements in the movie for it to be good. And sometimes to talk about a movie looking good, Lost in Space is an example of a Netflix show that looks like their budget is efficiently spent, as opposed to say some of the stuff we've talked about with The Witcher recently. But not only does this movie look good, and I feel like it's shot well, the music is outstanding, and the music is very creepy in spots. It's very deliberate. It's just a joy to listen to, and I just think it adds so much to the film. And I know we always talk about how editing can make or break a film, but that being said, music can do a tremendous amount too. So even if it's not visually appealing, or in this case, you don't, everybody's maybe older, elegantly dressed, maybe not in the case, some of them look like kind of bums, rapscallions, if you will. It's not a bunch of pretty models that are being filmed here, but yet it's very lush. It's very, old school kind of money feel to it, and the music just seems to be right along with it. There's no radio music. There's
Yeah,
no goofy stuff.
I really enjoy the music in this, especially Corso's theme, because usually it plays like when he's walking around investigating, and that theme of his is perfect for someone just randomly walking around and investigating and being all shrewd, and again, it has a very noir quality to it. All of the songs kind of have that. This is mysterious, but this is also intriguing, and this is intellectually stimulating. Pay attention, and it's a very well placed, it's a very well placed thing, especially when you consider that. I think by this point, Roman Polanski had been um, forced to take asylum in Europe
Not forced.
because of his various things, and this entire movie was basically him going, okay, how can I make a film without having, access to anywhere in America? It's remarkably resourceful because you don't notice it. It worked perfectly for the plot of the thing. It works perfectly as kind of this globe-trotting puzzle solving adventure that we're involved in. And given that he was basically barred from entire countries at this point, it's remarkably resourceful on his part that he was able to manage all this.
Yeah, so whenever I see a film, like when we talked about Mission Impossible, if I've been to any of the places that things are shot at, that's one of the things I like to look at and go, okay, does it look like the way I do, when I was there? And I was in Paris, and instead of picking out, say, the Eiffel Tower, the Champs-Élysées, or something specific that, is associated with Paris per se, and making it a focal point of the movie. What I like about what goes on in here, for example, is when he's walking along the river, that that's how I remember seeing Paris and what it looked like to me. I don't know if it's the camera angle or what, but it's mostly body in the frame, not rather than just a little body and all the crap going on behind it. And it just really, really looks that way. And I'm like, wow, he's got some great shots of what it's really like. And if you watch like The Bourne Identity and they're driving around in Paris, that kind of looks like it too, but it's cold and gray and wet. But also, of course, a gazillion cuts. So, like I say, this movie's very patient about showing you all those things, and I like the fact that it's a little globetrotter aspect to it. Where you're in Portugal, where you're here, where you're there, and at this time, about halfway through the movie, yes, there's this familiar kind of following around as we find out later. We don't know if she's working for the devil, if she's working for one of the others, if we know she's not probably going to be an innocent person, because as this movie goes on, and again, without sounding like it's denigrating it, there's no way in hell, and this is the part that I like what Polanski did with the film. There's no way you take any of this seriously as far as the occult goes. Like, you really don't believe the devil's going to get summoned. You really don't believe there's such a thing as a familiar. But then you get to a point where, like, she, like, you know, helps him in a fight, and she marks him with her blood, and she's almost floating down, and you see it for a split second. You're like, okay, they are going to go there. I didn't think they would, but then they're going to, and you're like, okay, how are they going to pull this off? And then you start saying, the book's about summoning the devil, and it's like, is this how it's going to end up? I mean, really? And does get extreme. I mean, we know what the ending is like, and we're getting there soon. But at this point, I'm going, okay, I like the mystery, I like what's going on, but now you're really going to do this. So to me, this was a kind of good point in the film where what I was expecting out of it, I wasn't sure at first. I was pleased by it, but now I'm going, I'm intrigued by how they're going to finish it, because sometimes you can do something so good, you love it so much, but then you go, how are we going to resolve it? So, did you have any issues with that part of the movie, or what do you think?
No, as someone who has practiced various kinds of magic in the occult, for 13 and a half out of 24 years. This movie is very respectful of the occult as far as everything is concerned. And this is something you get a lot in like B movies, where you kind of like they'll name drop certain things in the occult, but then they won't really. It will just be there to serve like this is our point where we reference things that actually exist thing. But in this, it's very respectful because as someone who studied this, I can tell you that a lot of times if you go looking for the big overt stuff, if you go looking for the flashy stuff and the summoning of demons and the summoning of angels and the summoning of this and the summoning of that, you are likely going to be disappointed because when it comes to big, flashy, extravagant magic, these kind of spells take years if they work at all, and getting them to work, period, is a pain in the ass, something fierce. So having everything be very subtle and very sort of weaponizing coincidence, I found that to be extremely accurate to how the occult itself actually works. And while we're on this topic, I gotta give a nice shout out for the research team that must have been involved with this movie because they name drop a lot of works here, or they reference a lot of works here that actually do exist. Like in the Fargus scene, where they reference he has an entire occult section. Most of those books that he references, the one in particular that I'm thinking of was de Plessis' Dictionnaire Infernal, or the Infernal Dictionary. That book is kind of famous in circles regarding demonology, so I was genuinely impressed that not only did they take the occult more seriously than a lot of Hollywood movies do, but also they did enough research to where they could throw in bits and pieces of other works and work it into the Ninth Gate mythology without really missing a beat, to the point where I actually had to look up if the book in question exists. Though I have a theory about that, and we'll get into my theory as we get closer to the ending, because it's kind of a game changer if you know what to look for.
Yeah, and to me, at this point, like I say, it's probably obviously deliberate on Polanski's part here, directing it, where you don't know. Obviously, you've got this lady that's protecting him, and he knows he's getting sucked into something. He's not sure what. Once he basically admits that to her, you see her taking on a more prominent role, at least a little bit as far as guidance. And she never really got physically involved. She just kind of appeared. And another little theme I had forgotten that I wanted to mention too was that some of the funny things that show up in here or just I don't know why, and maybe I'm looking into it. We used to always joke back in the day that, and it may still be true, there was a thing that like every serial killer that got caught in the United States had a copy of Catcher in the Rye, and so it was flagged. And there was a joke how that was in the movie Seven or something along those lines. But what I noticed is when Johnny, or when Corso's at his crappy little apartment, and he's getting ready to eat before he gets seduced. He's making like a TV dinner, and on top of the microwave, there's a book there about like understanding people, and it just kind of the way it was placed. They didn't show it to you, but you almost couldn't help but see it if you're just kind of looking around. And then, of course, there's another scene where the familiar shows up and she's in the hotel lobby, and he walks up and she's reading How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And so not only are we talking basically about a book here, there's all these other things that are popping up. And I'm like, he must have had a hell of a lot of fun putting these little Easter eggs and stuff in it too. Um, yeah, I mean, it's like the one lady that I thought was pretty interesting was it Telfer, the lady, the disabled one in Paris, where he goes to meet her, and he goes through this real elaborate way of just kind of letting her run her mouth and talk about stuff. But there's a lot of exposition there that fills in some of the holes. And then of course he gets blackjack. He wakes up and. She's got this really awful look on her face, but the place is on fire, and he just escapes and all that. Now you're like, okay, now he's just like going, I'm in it to win it. I don't know what the hell's going on, but this is just getting crazy. And of course, Balkan keeps calling him wanting updates and stuff, and you hear that Balkan's like not in his office, that he's like maybe in an airport or in a train station or traveling around, and he couldn't give a rat's ass anything that Corso's saying to him. So you go, wait a minute, are all these things happening? Balkan's people making sure he's doing it, or does he have another group maybe that we don't see that's getting some of the information? And well, maybe it's Lena Olin's character. It's just those plot holes I don't want to get
It's
into too much, but there a lot. It really starts piecing together and building up here as we reach the third act.
it's very funny that Balkan the Balkan calls are played mostly for comedy when you get them, but it gets to the point where, again, the kind of weaponization of coincidence that you get when you get into occult matters. It's nothing really big at first, but a little coincidence here, a little coincidence there, and then all of a sudden you're into this, otherworldly weird shit. Um, and it was kind of interesting seeing, because Corso, as far as we know, doesn't believe in anything. Like he
He's
very well
us.
probably is an atheist, probably is an agnostic, doesn't believe in anything supernatural, and then all of a sudden these little tidbits and coincidences start piling up, and then all of a sudden, oh wait, and then of course we see um, the green-eyed familiar there helping him in the fight, and we actually see it, I think, before he does, but he's not a slouch as far as this goes. He knows, but by the time, but I'd say by the time Fargus is dead, he starts going, okay, there's genuinely something here, because I think he literally walks up to the green-eyed familiar and goes, "It's come to my attention that you know too damn much." And there's a lot of really great lines in here actually that are just like bantery lines that people would actually come up with. It's not like forced comedic banter or anything. It's just this is a weird ass situation and people reacting to this weird ass situation the way people would react to it.
I do appreciate his willingness or ability or whatever you want to call it to accept the reality of the situation that he's in based on the events that are going around it, because he still kind of doesn't believe. And then you start realizing that the different camps have their own desires for this book, and so you're not sure who's doing what. And then I honestly don't really believe much in all that stuff. So to me, I just kind of agreed more with what happens when they track Lena Olin's character to this big huge mansion. They're getting, it's almost the eve of the dying of the guy that wrote it or whatever like that. The significant date that something may happen,
The Sabbath that they're going to do.
yeah, and so everyone's dressed in like the black robes. They're having this big thing, and this is before Eyes Wide Shut came out, I believe, if I'm correct. I may be wrong on that, but it's very similar kind of a scene.
Yeah, Eyes Wide Shut was 2001, I think, and this was 99.
So you know they kind of do the incognito thing and sneak in and all that, and then Balkan kind of crashes the party, and he takes the book and he kind of berates everybody in a great little speech about how you guys aren't true believers of this, and I alone here am the only one that's worthy of the knowledge that's in here and can understand it, and all y'all are just here trying to basically have an orgy is what it is. And he's kind of they're all kind of like whatever, but then ruckus ensues and all that stuff, and they get separated, and you go, wow, Balkan really does believe in this, and the other one really did marry the old man for his money, and that's all she wanted the book for, so she could be the queen bee of the secret sect, and everyone could fool around, in their old age and having these sloppy little orgy
Well,
sex
well,
scenes.
I don't think it's that they didn't believe in it. I think Balkan's calling out was really just them being silly. And again, speaking as someone who has a background in this stuff, there is actually a lot of unnecessary theater around a lot of this stuff. A lot of the grimoires or books of spells that were written in the Middle Ages were actually written in code, and so shouldn't be taken always 100% literally. So you get people doing these complex sabbats and standing around uh, chanting mumbo jumbo as they both put it at different points in the movie, And it is very silly if you know what they're actually referring to or what text they're actually pulling off of. And it was nice to see that. It was also nice to see how precise the rituals in question need to be in order to work. Because of course, we see later on Bulkin takes the three engravings from the Ninth Gate books in question, and he tries to do the ritual as per the ritual's actual instructions, and
We'll
it's
get there
very
in just a second, because there's a lot to say about that. And
oh so much to say and so
so at
much to
this
laugh.
point, just a couple quick notes, and we'll segue into that. Yeah, the movie's a little over 2 hours long, I think, and so you're starting to feel it because everyone I think is conditioned for 90 minutes, and that's kind of cool. And wherever you think it's going to end, there's like another minute and another minute and another minute. So basically, him and the familiar are following him to try to go to, to track him down, but the car gets waylaid that they're in and all that, and they end up kind of just going on a little mini adventure yet again, trying to find it. So there's not a lot of talking going on, but I gotta say this: two things in particular. It doesn't mean anything to me, but Johnny Depp, basically, in almost all the scenes you see him in here, Lee Corso. Oh my God, he'd kill me if I heard that. Mr. Corso, he's got the satchel thing that he has. Okay, whatever. But the fashion award for this particular episode goes to Balkan because he's wearing this old school 1930s gangster pinstripe Wall Street suit, and it's phenomenal. And he's a big dude. I mean, he's got a powerful frame to him and all that, and that's why he did a really good job with Dracula. He physically looked like it, kind of like a Christopher Lee in a way. But yeah, Corso finds him and follows him up to this building that all this thing was supposed to happen, and it's like dusk and it's real quiet, and you see some great little special effects where he goes in and follows him, and then Balkan, even though he's a bastard, basically, like you say, this code that these thieves have among themselves, at least a little bit, he's basically saying, "Hey, look, I've got everything. There's a check waiting for you. Just get the hell out of here. You don't need to be here." And I'll take a step back and let you take it from here.
Okay, so as we find out a little later on, one of the engravings is a forgery. So, despite the fact that Bulkin does the ritual more or less properly as per the book's instructions, because one of those engravings is a forgery, it doesn't have the appropriate magical symbolism it needs to open the ninth gate. Thereby, Vulcan essentially thinks that he has accomplished the working, and he passes his hands through close to candle flames, and I guess he's probably imbibed of some like ritual oils, which for those that don't know, a lot of ritual ointments and things taken from grimoires in the Middle Ages were mildly hallucinogenic, so that probably goes a long way to explain it.
Hmm.
And he thinks essentially that he's immune to fire. At which point he douses himself in gasoline or oil and lights himself the fuck on fire.
Now,
And
before continuing, let me point out the thing that makes this funny is really two things. One, there's a struggle, and it's coincidental, and it sounds like I would say crappy writing, that Corso kind of falls through the floor and is just kind of sitting there with his head popped up. That's basically the main picture that I got, and it's funny because he's sitting there forced to look up and watch all this. And what also, besides that being kind of silly, but it makes sense for what's going on, is the fact that Balkan gives this incredible speech in his delivery, and I'm watching this going. This is probably the best scene in the entire movie, not because of what happens, but because he is selling you on something that for the most part up to this point 90% you're going, it's ridiculous, something's going to go wrong, you're going to, if you're involved in flame, you're going to burn yourself alive. And then the sincerity of his convictions here, where he talks about Ilon and blah blah blah, and just the way he talks, the way he sounds, it's just such an incredible delivery. And I'm like, I don't know how he kept a straight face. He's a damn good actor. And like you say, he pours the gasoline around, does everything, and it's like, oh, look, my hands, and you see his hands not getting burned. And then he, pours it on his head, and you're like, get the fuck out of here. And then it happens.
And also again another sign that Roman Polanski knows at least some of his shit in regard to this topic. There is a tendency, especially for people that get into higher level ritual magic, to believe that they are some chosen messiah or chosen, God king or so on and so forth. That they're the special one. They're the only one that understands this, or they're the only one that unlocked the secret knowledge, or what have you. And very often, even for people that do seem to genuinely have some kind of power, and it is worth noting that Boris Balkan is an extremely rich motherfucker, and it is arguable that maybe some of his other occult knowledge may have played a role in that, and that this is just a another level, or the next big step in his ascension, as it were, which he utterly fails at and pays the price accordingly. So it's nice to see that, but yes, he does become so zealotous and so blinded by his own delusions of grandeur that it's funny that the devil, at least according to this movie, favors a guy who doesn't really believe in anything because, of course, the devil is the quintessential rebel. So why would he want a mindless zealot who's groveling at his feet and so forth? And as we see, groveling gets you nowhere in occult matters. So
It's put in there, shit got real. It got real, real fast, and it was over real quick. But see, that's the whole thing. These little touches here, where Johnny's forced, or of course, is forced to watch it being pushed to their whole. You're like, oh, that's so dumb and stupid. And you're like, okay, I see what they're doing for the movie, and it's kind of funny. But then the delivery is really great, and then you're like, okay, okay, you deserve what you get, but you're like, okay, I understand it. He was sincere, so he's the one that should have ended up in the position to do that. He's right. Now, of course, it fails miserably, and it's really funny. You think, okay, it's how are they going to end it now? So of course you get like this. It almost feels like Coda at this point, but um, the familiar leaves a note basically on his car window when he stops to get gas, saying, the brothers, Portugal. So he goes there, and I guess they're dead or they've closed shop. Maybe they were other devils
Uh,
advocates, so to speak. But he finds
okay,
the ninth gate.
I think what happened in that scene, and it is somewhat ambiguous, so I might be wrong, but I think that the people he was talking to at the end there were the actual brothers that owned that place, and the people he talked to previously were demons that had taken on human form in order to sort of light the way for this for this puzzle ritual, which is sort of alluded to by the fact that one of the proper engravings in his copy of the Ninth Gate, shortly thereafter, is revealed to have the face of the two brothers who are twinsy. So I'm guessing it's because the devils in question were tasked with pointing people in the right direction. And it is funny that basically all the people involved in this whole shenanigan do see actual legitimate devils from time to time. It's just a matter of which one gets to the end quicker. And what really saves Corso is that the green-eyed familiar decides she doesn't want to serve Vulcan. She doesn't want to serve any of these other people. She kind of likes him, and I think what did it, what made her decide she liked him more than the others, was the fact that he doesn't really give a shit about this to begin with, and also that he cared for her when he thought she was just a human. So I'm betting he just basically smoothed his way into ultimate power is the lesson, or he accidentally smoothed his way into ultimate power. Just goes to show you, be nice to people. You might become a god at the end of it. Who knows?
Well, yeah, so I mean, it's pretty quiet this ending scene too. But basically, what it is he gets it, and a lot of people didn't. A lot of people I know that did see it when we would talk about it back in the day say, "I don't get the ending. What the hell happened there too? She's having sex with him. I don't understand what's going on." And this bright light and the movie ends. That's stupid. And it's like, well, the movie wasn't about somebody understanding the riddle. and figuring it out like Balkan did, it, to your point, with the fact that there were technically devils here. Even other major characters in here did say they've seen devils, and so here at the end, to your point, he's a convert. So she does what any devil would do. She takes a seed, and he looks like, oh shit, I'm letting it happen. And he's like, that's it. She's like, yeah, but you take it from here, finish it up.
Yeah, and well, it funnily enough, when they're having sex, there's this one shot that directly mirrors some Sumerian or Babylonian depictions of a demon by the name of Lilitu or Lilith, depending on the biblical translation.
Hmm.
And I'm betting that was probably deliberate. But more to the point, it also references in a lot of medieval literature um, witches' Sabbaths, in the sense of the medieval definition, someone who works directly with a demon. A lot of witches' Sabbaths are depicted with the witches in question having sex with a demon, and so naturally part of the ritual is her deciding I like you enough that I'm gonna let you do this, and he does, and he enjoys it, so it's not like he's in, everlasting pain or anything, but he still has to do the ritual, and so we cut off right as he's about to do the ritual. But the funny thing is, or the thing that I noticed that always makes me laugh is the light that emanates from the castle he's supposed to do this ritual in opens the door for him. So at that point, you know it's basically all but a fait accompli that he's successfully managed this. All that's left is the negotiation and the signing on the dotted line, as it were.
Yeah, and so to me, it was all really about identifying somebody that would be the fit for here. And so I think the whole movie, honestly, is just one big swerve. And I think some of the funny parts to it, the music, the deliberate pace, it was all to distract you from the fact that it's all about her getting him and we watching his descent, and not into madness or anything, but to what it is. So it really is about the journey, not the destination, to use a cliche. And that's one of the things I appreciate, because overall I think it's an excellent film. Love it a lot. I agree with you. I don't think it's a horror. I think it's a thriller, even though it's got an occult theme to it. I'm putting it here though with a Too Extreme Horror Show for now, because there's almost really nothing scary these days, and frankly, we've been talking about doing this for years. So I gotta say, if you haven't seen it, guys, I like it a lot. You guys kind of an idea what I like. There's a little goofy with it, but it's just a great film. If you don't like slow movies, I don't know what to tell you. I just it's a great film. You got to see it. So give us your final thoughts, sir.
If you like pulp stories, you like noir detective stories, if you like high society stuff, if you're an antique lover like me, or you like the supernatural or have an occult background, or even if you just like Johnny Depp, because I think this is probably my favorite role for Johnny Depp, not least of which because he doesn't do the stupid faux British accent thing that he does in virtually everything for no reason now. Um, yeah, this movie is just awesome. The only moments that even give me any pause for it is the more over the top moments, but they pay it off because the characters that are acting like a mad person are actually mad by the movie's own rules. This movie is basically my preferred cinematic comfort food, I guess is the way I put it best. So yeah, if you in the fall or on a rainy day, or you just don't have anything better to do, turn on the Ninth Gate. It's a surprisingly really kind of feel good movie for being as dark and weird as it is.
Yeah, and I agree. I think probably his best performance. I mean, people might say Donnie Brasco and a few others, but I look at this and go, this was just tailor made for him. It's a lot of fun to watch. I do enjoy Polanski films, and obviously he was influenced, I imagine, by Hitchcock a bit. Who gives a rat's ass? You see everybody now talking about Carpenter and being influenced by him and younger generations and stuff. So who cares? As long as it's
Well,
a good thing, you're entertained.
it's kind of like with Joker. It's the best Scorsese movie that Scorsese never made. So it's better than 90% of the stuff that Scorsese actually makes now. So why not put it up with the movies that it's similar to?
Yeah, Ninth Gate, great film, great acting, just great. It's extreme. Yeah, light yourself on fire. It goes there, and it's phenomenal. So, don't let me say thanks for guesting on this tonight. I know you've been wanting to do it. I'm glad we got a chance to finally do it. Um, Great film. One day we may do a deep dive on this and do the whole thing. 2 hours worth, or even more. So we'll see. But
Yeah,
that's why
why
we try
not?
these topical ones.
It will only be the thousandth time I've watched this movie, so I that's the other thing. This is a movie that I can watch back like over and over again back to back and not be bored, and that's very hard to do in this day and age.
It is rewatchable, definitely, for lots of little things. Yeah, so guys, thanks for showing up. If we don't talk, have a safe and happy New Year's. And, we're going to be looking at doing a couple movies. The schedule's going to be a little off and probably get reset this next coming weekend. So Sunday we'll be doing our typical 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock time frame Eastern for streams. I think before that, the doctor and I might be doing Treasure of the Sierra Madre. We might do something else also. We're debating that, but Thursday's a possibility, or Friday for a stream before Sunday. So, guys, for Dalton, for myself, stay extreme. Take care, guys. Good night. Toodles.
Cheers, guys. Don't make deals with demons.